Johnny Talk Sports here with the Week 7 college football predictions. And today I have a guest today. We've got D-Dog. How are you doing today, D-Dog?
Good. How about you?
You know, I'm doing all right. Let me just tell you, man. I've been saying for weeks that the later on the college football season goes, the better it's going to get. And I remember you telling me in the preseason that it wouldn't be shocking if we saw a bunch of upsets throughout the season. And in fact, we've had a bunch of them throughout these first few weeks because this is the third consecutive week where we've had a top 10 team lose to a non-top 10 opponent. Like, why do you think there are a lot of these upsets coming in the beginning portion of the season?
Well, with the lack of practice and since teams couldn't do spring practices, a lot of teams didn't get the practices they should have done. So there's probably going to be a lot of upsets. Probably expect more.
Could that kind of be why we're seeing teams that aren't performing as what we were anticipating? Like, for example, we have LSU. They've lost to Mississippi State and Missouri. Could that be why their defense isn't that good so far, especially with Bo Pelini as a defensive coordinator? Because you remember, Bo Pelini was a defensive coordinator on their national championship team in 2007.
Yeah, that might be. Then again, who really knows? I don't know.
I think maybe another element to that.
I agree, though.
I think maybe another element to that could be, another element to why maybe we're seeing all these upsets is, could it be because maybe like the home teams, like with the crowds not being at full capacity, especially because if you look, because I know you're a huge Nebraska fan, like how many games do you think Nebraska has won in the last 5 years because of the home field advantage?
Not very many, to be honest.
Well, I know we had the Mike Riley year to deal with for Nebraska, but I mean, I would say maybe that game against Oregon a few years ago, maybe that was.
Oh yeah, definitely that one. I heard that. Definitely that one. I have heard that one was one of the loudest crowds in Memorial Stadium in a long time.
And I do believe that college football will get better, especially with the Big Ten opening up their games next week. You know, with the Pac-12 opening up, I think it's that first Saturday in November, right? Is like the 6th or 7th there.
It's the 6th or 7th.
Okay. Because I believe every single conference, with the exception maybe the Ivy League, has some plans to return to play.
Yeah, I believe so.
So who do you think are your top 4 teams, like, right now? Like, if you had to set the college football playoff right now, who would it be? And this only includes the teams that have played.
Probably Alabama, Georgia. That's all I could think of right now, to be honest. But like I said, most teams don't look as good as they should without all the practices.
I mean, I would say Clemson is the clear number 1 because they had a convincing against Miami last week. I would probably put Alabama at 2, only because of their consistency. And even though their defense gave a bunch of yards and points last week to Ole Miss, a lot of teams are doing that. I mean, Georgia's number 3.
Yeah, I'd say Clemson first, Alabama second, Georgia third.
And maybe Notre Dame would be 4th. Because I think Notre Dame, I think they could be that team that can challenge Clemson. I think that offensive line for Notre Dame, I think it would provide a challenge for Clemson.
Maybe.
All right.
Guess we'll see.
So let's get into the Week 7 picks. Our first game of the week, Coastal Carolina versus number 21 Louisiana. This was a game that was supposed to be played last week, but it got postponed because of Hurricane Delta. So this game will be on Wednesday evening. I believe it's on ESPN, which this is a game that I might try to catch, even though it's in the middle of the week, because Coastal Carolina is playing some really good football. and so is Louisiana, because we saw Louisiana earlier in the season beat Iowa State on the road. So who do you got in this one?
I'm gonna go with Coastal Carolina. How about you?
You know, I did read about Coastal Carolina having a good offense, but really, Coastal Carolina, they've played Arkansas State, which I can get because Arkansas State did beat Kansas State this season. They played Kansas, which is the bottom feeder of the Big 12. And I think they played, like, what was it, Campbell or something?
Maybe.
I got to go with Louisiana in this one. I know Louisiana, after beating Iowa State in their last couple of games, they've won in overtime and on a game-winning field goal. But I just think this rushing attack for Louisiana, I think if they pound the football on this Coastal Carolina defense, keep the Coastal Carolina offense off the field, which I believe it's a top 10 offense in college football right now.
Yeah.
At least statistically. But maybe once Coastal Carolina faces a team like Louisiana, maybe their offense won't be as effective. So I'm going to take Louisiana in this one based off what I've seen this season. Because unfortunately, once you get these group of 5 matchups to predict, you kind of got to go off kind of what you've seen throughout the season so far. So I'm going to take Louisiana in this one. So our next matchup is number 8 Cincinnati versus Tulsa. Who do you got in this one?
I'm going to go with Cincinnati since I haven't seen a Tulsa game yet. But I think it's going to be pretty close.
That is very interesting that you say that by saying you haven't seen a Tulsa game yet this season. Because Tulsa has only played 2 games this season, and they were against Oklahoma State, which they gave Oklahoma State a run for their money, and it took the third-string quarterback for Oklahoma State to really get that offense going against Tulsa. And they played UCF, who they happened to pull off the upset against. And I know there were some experts that were talking about maybe this is the year where we get a group of 5 team in the college football playoff. And they were talking about Cincinnati being maybe that team that could sneak in there. But I'm going to pick the upset here. I'm going to go with Tulsa in this matchup. I just think that Tulsa, based off what I've seen this year from them, they came pretty close to beating Oklahoma State. They pull out the upset against UCF. And I believe that Tulsa has had some extra time to prepare for this matchup. So I'm going to go with the upset. And plus, if the recent history in college football is on my side, which sometimes history is on your side, sometimes it isn't, we'll see a top 10 team lose again this week. And I think that's going to be Cincinnati. Because if you look at the other top 10 teams this week, you got Clemson playing Georgia Tech, which should be an easy win for Clemson. Then, of course, you have Alabama and Georgia playing each other, which we're going to get to at the very end. You got Notre Dame playing Louisville, North Carolina playing Florida State. You've got Ohio State, Penn State, they haven't played yet. Oklahoma State and Baylor was forced to postpone because of current 2020 circumstances. And you have Florida taking on LSU, which we're going to talk about in just a moment. I would say Cincinnati, this could be a game that maybe Cincinnati goes in thinking they're going to win, but they end up losing and Tulsa pulls off yet another upset throughout this college football season. So I'm going to take Tulsa in this one to pull off the upset. Next, we have UCF and Memphis. Interesting quarterback battle. We got Dylan Gabriel for UCF and Brady White for Memphis. Who do you got in this one? I think this one is going to be an offensive explosion, this one.
Yeah, I agree. I have UCF in this one. I don't see them losing 2 in a row. So I got UCF.
This is going to be a great game. I'm looking forward to this one.
I agree.
I would say that this one is going to be the first one to maybe 45 wins this game. And I think it's going to be UCF. I just think Dylan Gabriel right now, he is shown to be a good passer in this UCF offense. I believe he's in the top 10 amongst quarterbacks in passing yards. So I will take UCF in this matchup.
Good pick.
Next, we have LSU and number 10 Florida in the Swamp. Now, this is probably going to be another one of those games. First one to 45 probably wins this one. Because both of these defenses, they just are off to a lackluster start during this season. And also Dan Mullen is encouraging that the Swamp be sold out for this game because Florida's Governor Ron DeSantis has given the okay to allow sporting events to be at full capacity.
Well, I'm gonna go with Florida in this one. Like you said, the first score 45 or whatever is gonna win this game. I think whoever makes the first mistake is gonna lose.
And that's an interesting key in this game as well, because with the defenses not being so good to start the season, in fact, I believe that both of these defenses are in the bottom 5 statistically amongst total defense, especially with LSU not looking good at all, especially losing to Mississippi State, which ever since Mississippi State beat LSU, complete lackluster. KJ Costello has 9 interceptions on the season. And Derek Stingley really isn't proving to make a difference so far in this LSU pass defense. While Florida, on the other hand, at least their offense has at least proven themselves. I mean, you could argue and say LSU has as well. But I just think this could be a national championship hangover year for the Tigers. And they had a bunch of players go to the NFL. Some opted out of the season like Jamar Chase, who was probably the number 1 receiver taken in the 2021 NFL draft. But I'm going to take Florida in this one. I know that both these teams are coming off emotional losses. Florida, game-winning field goal with no time left on the clock against Texas A&M. I just think Florida, they beat themselves in this game. I mean, even though Texas A&M kind of allowed them to kind of make the game as close as it was, because when you look at the overall game as a whole, Florida should have been dominated last week. They should have lost by at least maybe 10 points. But too many A&M mistakes in that game. Then Florida ultimately made the mistake towards the end of the game. They made that one where it was costly. So I'm going to take Florida in this matchup as kind of what we're agreeing with. First one to 45 is probably going to win this game. I just think Florida is going to win this game because I think they're the only team out of these two that's even capable of getting to 45 points. I at least think the Florida defense is probably going to improve at some point in the season. I just think it's going to take a couple of weeks to get into the rhythm of things. So I will take the Gators in this matchup. So it looks like so far we've agreed on 2 picks and we disagreed on 2 picks. So on to our 5th one. We've got Pittsburgh and number 13 Miami. How do you see this game turning out?
I have said that I don't think this game's going to be very close at all. But I'm going to change my mind on that. I'm going to pick Miami. I think they'll bounce back. Who do you think?
You know, I do think this game's going to be very close. I think with Miami coming off an emotional loss to Clemson, at least could it be kind of a morale victory kind of thing, even though they lost 42-17. You have to look at what I think turned the tide in that game, and that was the interception in the end zone in that third quarter, which Miami, they were hanging in there with Clemson at least better than what almost every single team, with the exception of probably LSU and North Carolina last year, about hanging in there, because it was only an 11-point game when the interception took place, and they were kind of holding their own throughout that first half and the first few minutes of the third quarter last week. But Miami's defense has kind of been concerning throughout a couple points in the season, especially with Louisville giving up a lot of total yards in that game. I think Pittsburgh's going to be able to put up a significant amount of yards on that Miami defense. And we got Kenny Pickett, the quarterback for Pittsburgh, leading the nation in passing yards at this very moment. I think Miami wins the game, but I think Pittsburgh is going to beat, I believe it's a 10.5-point spread right now. I think Miami only wins by 6 points in this one. I think Pittsburgh keeps this close from start to finish. But I think Miami, I think they survive in this one, because sometimes in college football, it's survive in advance. I think the Hurricanes will do that this week.
I agree.
All right, second to last one. We've got Boston College and number 23 Virginia Tech.
In this one, I have watched both teams play. I watched Boston College a little more. But I'm going to go with Virginia Tech. I just think they're the better team right now.
Okay, interesting statement you would say about them being a better team, because especially with the lack of practice, which you were talking about, anybody can beat anybody. And now Virginia Tech, they essentially got dominated against by North Carolina. But I admire Virginia Tech for fighting back in that game. They were able to fight back multiple times in that game, but ultimately they did too much, which was too little too late. And that was essentially how I took that game. Because I said last week that Virginia Tech, they were able to assert their running game against North Carolina. I think for this game, Virginia Tech has to assert the running game, especially with Khalil Herbert, a top 5 rusher statistically in college football so far. And Boston College, they competed with North Carolina really well in that game. In fact, they only really lost. Even though the scoreboard doesn't say it, they only lost by 2 points, even though it was really 4 because of that pick 2. Because Boston College, they had the potential of tying that game and sending it to overtime. But I'm going to go Virginia Tech to bounce back in this one. I just think that running game is going to assert themselves against Boston College. So I will take the Hokies in this matchup. And last but not least, not only the game of the week, but probably the game of the season so far, number 3 Georgia and number 2 Alabama. Now, I know that we had talked earlier about how you were undecided about this pick. And to let you in on a secret, I'm undecided on this pick as well. In fact, I didn't pick anybody in this game yet. I think maybe when we talk it through, maybe we can come up with a pick. Although Alabama, they're coming off what they would feel to their standards an abysmal performance. But Ole Miss, they put up some points against Florida. Ole Miss, they put up some points against Kentucky. So Ole Miss's offense, I think, is going to look pretty good throughout the season. While Georgia, they have been in some quarterback controversy all throughout, probably the last maybe 10 months. You had Jake Fromm declared for the NFL. Jamie Newman announces his transfer to Georgia. Jamie Newman opts out of the season. JT Daniels transfers to Georgia. JT Daniels isn't cleared eligible to play yet. You had DeJuan Mathis in the opener against Arkansas. The Georgia offense didn't seem to function as well with Mathis under center than it is right now with Stetson Bennett under center. And for Alabama, you've got Mac Jones, inexperienced quarterback as well, although he does look very well statistically so far this season. And this is going to be the toughest defense that Mac Jones has faced so far in his career. In fact, for both sides, both these teams, both these quarterbacks are going to be facing the best defense they've ever seen. And this is in prime time. With the limited capacity allowed for games this season, I would say Georgia has a fighting chance. I'd say that Georgia right now is the only team that has a defense that's capable of winning the national championship, at least amongst the SEC teams. But Alabama doesn't underperform 2 weeks in a row. So something has to give here. And Alabama, they always seem to do well in prime time. I think this is going to come down to the running game for both teams. Alabama's got a stellar offensive line, while Georgia's defense is second in college football right now in total defense. But I'm going to pick Alabama to win this game. I just think that the spotlight is going to be a little too much for Stetson Bennett, while Mac Jones, at least he's had the spotlight on him already, going in the Iron Bowl last year. And with Najee Harris, 5 touchdowns last week. And Alabama doesn't underperform 2 weeks in a row. I think Nick Saban's going to have his team ready. I think Alabama wins this. I'm going to say it's high scoring. I think Alabama wins this by at least a touchdown, maybe even 2 touchdowns. I just can't see Georgia win this game. Maybe the Bulldogs will prove me wrong. but it's just hard to pick against Alabama, at least in the regular season, because Alabama doesn't really lose this early in the season. In fact, it's kind of rare that they lose at least this early. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm going to agree on Alabama not underperforming 2 weeks in a row. I'm going to pick Alabama too. I agree with you.
But what do you think Georgia has to do to win this game?
It's going to take a lot, I think, actually.
Because if you look at Georgia so far this season, they've played Arkansas, which Arkansas has beaten Mississippi State, and they should have beaten Auburn last week. Georgia also dominated against Auburn really convincingly. And last week, the second half against Tennessee, they really dominated. So I think Georgia's defense is going to have – if Georgia's defense can keep Alabama kind of on their toes, kind of make Mac Jones force some bad throws, I think Georgia's a good chance to win the game. But I just think Jalen Waddle and Devonta Smith and even John Mitchie, I think they're going to be too fast for Georgia's secondary. I'm going to pick Alabama to win this game.
Yeah, I agree. I see Alabama winning in a close one, though.
Close one.
Yeah.
All right, so those are the Week 7 college football predictions. Thanks for joining me today, D-Dog. I appreciate it.
Hopefully I'll be able to be on again. I guess see you next week.
Oh, yeah, it was only a matter of time until I had you on. Until I figured out how Zoom can be successful. I'm like, yeah, we definitely got to do a video together at some point. I feel like this was the best way to do it, considering that we have the game of the season so far with 2 versus 3, primetime CBS. That's going to be a good one.
Oh, yeah. I agree.
All right, so like, share, and subscribe, and I will talk to you next time.